One.
What's going on, Oasis?
Man, happy fall Monday to you.
Dude.
Man, I just saw like 20 leaves on the ground last night as I was walking around the house. I was like, oh.
And the Lord is in in his house, right?
Yeah, but that's also, for me, that's also the fuse lit for the TNT of like, the winter is coming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the truth.
The bitterness when you look outside and you feel like you're in a Cold War.
Yeah. What's the difference between fall and dehydration? I don't know what's going on with the leaves. I'm not buying it yet, but I guess it is supposed to be cooler this week, so
Yeah.
Praise God for that. I'll take some cooler weather. I'm not a cold weather fan. Come to find out this year, I'm not a hot weather fan either.
That's what you thought you were.
Yeah, well, I used to be. I guess that's an age thing. I don't know, man. You just get to a certain point where it's like, man, I don't like it. I don't like the heat. But then I walk outside and it's cold. Yeah, I don't like this either. you know. But I wear shorts almost year round, and if I'm wearing shorts in the winter, it's because it's cold, like, and the wind's blowing, right? So I don't look forward to those days of winter and my leg captivity. That's not great. Yeah. I wish Oasis maybe was in some place temperate where it was acceptable for me to wear shorts on Sunday. You know, that's a social norm. Where would that be? I guess Hawaii, someplace like that.
I'm gonna say Florida.
Yeah, Florida. Yeah. Yeah, we can only wish, right? That's just simply not the case.
So next week we're gonna start a church plant, and sign-ups will be right here in the O.
Right. That's such a good call. I mean, yeah.
Oh, look at that, Preston May.
Yeah, there he is.
The Florida worship pastor. Are you in shorts right now, Preston?
No kidding. All right, so a couple different things. One that I have for my passage today, it's going to be a really familiar story to anybody who's ever been to church, Sunday school, youth, children's ministry. I went to Vacation Bible School once and heard this story, right?
Yep.
And it's the story of the prodigal son, the parable of the lost son. It's just a story that Jesus uses to illustrate some pretty important truths, right? So I'm going to read really what I'm going to pick up in verse 17. We'll say 15. And the reason that we're going to do that is I'll break down a little bit of the story up before there. And what had happened was in this story, in this account, Jesus was telling of this son that went to his father and said, "Give me my inheritance," which is a pretty bold and brash statement anyway, and sets up for a pretty amazing plot to go along. And throughout what he's going into and through is he wants this so he can go live however he wants to live. That's it.
Yep.
And the father, according to the story, he relents and gives him and I guess gives him his inheritance, and he goes off and he squanders it on everything until he finds himself basically in the mud.
Can't get any lower.
You can't get any lower. And not only can he not get any lower, but he is in the pigs, watching the pigs eat their food, of which was not intended for him. And that's a pretty important part of that story.
Yep.
Whoever owns the pig was not coming to feed him.
Mm-mm.
They were feeding the pigs, and I guess if there's some leftovers or if you want to eat the poop and everything else that's in here with it, do what you got to do. So in this moment, Jesus describes this son as lower than the pigs. He didn't have the value of the pig,
which they did not touch.
They did not touch.
Even like mention.
So that's a pretty incredible picture that Jesus is painting of this individual. And so here's this son in verse 15. And so he went and hired himself out to the citizens of that country, who sent him to the fields to feed pigs, and he longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one would give him anything. So scrounge from the scraps, right?
Yeah.
So verse 17, when he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired men have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father, and I'll say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men. So he got up and went to his father. Now, we know the story. He heads back. And I love this because this is an account of every definitely teenage son that's ever been busted for something. You're going to come in contact with your parents eventually, so you have not only rehearsed this story, but it is pretty well done. Like, it's memorized. You got some motions to go along with it. So according to this story, I can imagine what that would look like of this son that he's walking home, and he's saying this over and over and over. When I see Dad,
when this statement said,
yeah, this is how this is going to play out. But while in verse 20, while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. And he ran to his son, and he threw his arms around him, and he kissed him. And the son said, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. And then the father cut him off. But to get to that point, that's something that's pretty important that we need to pay attention to. I think in this account, and this is what Jesus was trying to get across, is not only is the Father good, and not only is the Father accepting and loving and continuing to be loving, it was the point of where this son had to get. He was in the field, longing to eat what the pigs eat, and in his brain, he came to his senses, is what this says. He came to the conclusion that it is better to eat the scraps of my Father's house than it is to eat this. So it's better there. Even the least of these there is infinitely better than what I'm doing here on my own. Yeah. And so what the son had done going up into this point was he basically said that I want to be God. I want the Godship. I want the lead position in my narrative. The problem with it, it's not good enough. We're the problem, right? And so the father was like, you do what you got to do. Okay. But then he comes to his senses and he realizes that even the least of that is still getting fed. They're still better. And in that moment, it's this indication that he released his godship, right? Like, he's humbling himself to say, I'm going to go back to my father and say, I've sinned against the Father and I've sinned against you, and I'm sorry. Please hire me on. I'm no longer your son. He forfeited his position when he did that. That's what he was saying he was going to go do. And he went before the Father, humble. That's how the story reads. Yeah. And how did the Father respond? With love and mercy, like he said he was always going to do. But you're going to have to come before him like that. You're going to have to come before him with this humble nature of, look, I did it. I did exactly what you told me I shouldn't do. Yeah. I did all of those things, but it is so much better in your house. Even the least of these is so much better in your house. And I think that there's sometimes in our own life that we get so wayward, that we get so tied up in our own stuff that we're wrestling with that godship. We want the rule. But then we come to that moment where we think, it is so much better with you, God. It is so much better. Even as the least of these is so much better. I would rather be there, because at least in your presence, at least at your table, there's hope, right? There's love. Yeah. There's some grace that goes along with that. I have a chance there. Here, I'm going to starve to death. And spiritually, if we're going to go and we're going to choose to be our own God, we're going to starve to death. Ultimately, that's what's going to happen. And, you have the Ten Commandments, and you should have no other gods before him. We count in that, putting ourselves in that position. And the reality is we won't break any other of the commandments until we break that first one, until we choose our own path with that. And I'm choosing me, and therefore I'm forfeiting that. That's a problematic statement.
That's true. And I've never thought of that statement of like, that's the first levy of saying, God, you're not enough, or I am enough, or your choice isn't wanted. Yeah. So, and that's huge. I think so much comes with it when we look at the problem of life, and just thinking that we can solve it, that we have the solutions we have, the know-how we have, all the abilities to get with it. And I'm just going to do a little bit more just a sub point of when problems come our way. And I think it's probably more a characteristic of when we get to problems, because sometimes problems come and they are beyond our abilities to keep them from coming. And James, the half-brother Jesus, said, and when trials come, not if they come, but when they come. But I think there's a mindset that we have to have in place to not be overwhelmed or to not choose the almost good enough path or the prideful path. And I think it's this one little element that when problems come, that we're not distracted by the fanfare. Because problems come with a lot of fanfare. And you go down the what if rabbit hole, or you go down the if I only had this rabbit hole. There's a lot of fanfare to be brought up on. But I think we get distracted with problems or the fanfare of problems because we in our everyday life tend to only chase fanfare. We tend to only chase the end result idea of a solution or a goal, an achievement, but we have no area, or we're not mindful of the work that goes in to achieving that goal. And I say that to kind of paint this full picture. I mean, it is football season. Fans show up to the games with, let's be honest, no mindness of what practice went on, what work went into it. All the inconsistencies that have to be overcome of us individually or the team members for them to be better and them to move as one unit. We're not mindful of that. When I was in college, our track coach, he said this multiple times, that track, it being different than the other sports because it's individual and it is a team, but it's just a little bit different. He said that track is 60% mental, and there's no way to really quantify that, but you think about it. Here's another thing that is also true of track. Your body is 100% science. Science says with struggle and repetition, you will get stronger.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, so it's like, okay, so that's a part of the equation. The mental acceptance or the mental toughness for you to know that this struggle is coming and push through harder than what you think you can give. That's how you're going to get to achievement, getting through a problem, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So getting stronger, getting better, the ultimate result. But it's that mental barrier of, man, even in the workouts, like I felt the pain. I felt your body's like, man, just chill out right here. This is about as fast as I want to go. And that's really what my mind is saying. This is as fast as I want to go. Not as fast as I can go, but as fast as I want to go. And then so Solomon, in chapter 4, verse following, it's so simple. And this, I always forget what this passage is, but it's like, man, it is there. And it's verse 7 of chapter 4, and it says, and let this be the beginning of wisdom. Get wisdom. And whatever you get insight. Like it's that simple. And so inside this mindset of the toughness, keep the consistency of gaining knowledge. Keep the consistency of seeking it, chasing after it, not waiting until a problem comes to be like, and you're overwhelmed with the fanfare and you think that solving these other little solutions will ultimately just fix it all. And sometimes that's how problems work. You know, you solve it bit by bit. But I think our anxiety that gets amped up with it is, okay, but we're not being consistent. Because, man, he also says in this same chapter that wisdom will guard you.
Sure.
Man,
sure.
It will be your front. It will be your shield. It will be the relief valve of, although this is bigger than me, man, it's going to be okay. And that sounds cliche, but man, we're trusting in a God who created it all.
Yeah.
And if we're going to listen to his instructions, man, 2 chapters before, man, he gives a particular instruction of like, chase it like it's silver. Make sure, let it grab your attention. What's going to turn your head to get to a point of like, man, I enjoy this. I desire this. I want to know this. And if we allow that to sink in, man, those problems, we're not going to be distracted with the fanfare. We'll see the problem, but we'll see it for what it is. An opportunity for God's strength to be seen, or our faith in him to be expressed, to be strengthened. But, man, are we consistently always seeking that knowledge? Are we consistently gaining his strength so that we're not distracted by the fanfare of accomplishment? Or if I had daddy's money, then I'm going to I'm going to be God. Now I'm the one making the decisions, you know, and just like the story of the parable, like he wanted to be equal. He wanted to be his equal, and we are not God's equal. I'm not my dad's equal.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's such a great statement. I think that, inside of that, we just don't want to hurt. And building up that pain tolerance and everything that goes along with it.
Yeah, I did that this morning in my workout.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop.
I'm going to stop. Yeah. And that's just the repetitions. But I love what we said. It reminds me of just something that's so Paul's letters, that we look at that. We look at those struggles. We look at all of those things, not because of us, but because of what God is going to do and is doing through those. Man, that's a different perspective.
Yeah,
it is, and that's just a change of perspective. I think that myself, all of us probably need is understanding that our job here on Earth, it started about us, but it doesn't end about us. And it is about the Lord and the glory that we get to give Him through our struggles. So. It's a super important thing. Guys, we love you. It's good to see you. Wait, how long have we done this? I was thinking about this. It's 2020. Yeah? That's bizarre. I was thinking about it just on walking over here that this has been going on. So thank you.
Spring break.
Yeah, that's the truth, huh? Some of you have been joining us in various different ways and since then, so thank you for sticking it out. Sometimes this is a little more polished than others, and sometimes there's clearly something else is going on, whether it's in the background or we just came sprinting in from something else. But thank you for joining us. It is a privilege to talk God's Word with you. So I guess we'll catch you later. Love you guys.
Have a great week.